Is Piero Barone's withdrawal from the spotlight a calculated career move or a necessary act of survival? As we approach mid 2026, the walls around the Popera star have never been higher or more intentional. We're exposing the silent sacrifices and the rigid discipline required to maintain a life unseen. The lights find him before he finds them. They always do. 20,000 people are on their feet before the first note has even left his lips. And for a suspended electric moment, the arena holds its breath. A collective intake of air so enormous, it seems to shift the atmosphere inside the building. Then, Piero Barone opens his mouth, and the world, as most people know it, ceases to exist. The tenor voice that emerges is not merely beautiful, it is architectural. It fills the space the way water fills a vessel, completely inevitably, without a single gap left unfound. Women in the 43rd row are weeping before the first phrase resolves. Men who came only because their wives insisted find themselves gripping armrests with white-knuckled intensity they cannot explain. This is what Piero does. This is what Piero has always done, since he was a teenager in Sicily, who didn't fully understand yet that the gift living inside his chest would one day cost him something he hadn't yet learned to name. Backstage, 90 seconds before that entrance, he was standing very still, not pacing, not warming up, not exchanging excited glances with his bandmates, or feeding on the roar of the crowd filtering through the corridor walls. Just standing, eyes forward, jaw set, breathing with the controlled deliberateness of someone who has learned to manage something large and dangerous by never letting it see that you're afraid of it. A security guard nearby mistook the stillness for arrogance. It wasn't. It was something closer to the opposite. It was a man constructing himself, piece by piece, into the version the world expects. Because the version the world expects is not the version that woke up that morning in a hotel room, in a city that was not his home, looked at the ceiling and felt the specific loneliness of someone who has everything except the one thing that cannot be purchased, scheduled, or arranged by a management team. His name is on merchandise in 17 countries. His face has appeared on billboards in Tokyo, Buenos Aires, and Madrid. But ask him, truly ask him, what he did on a recent Tuesday afternoon, and the answer will be carefully, deliberately nothing, because the nothing is his, and the nothing is rare. Il Volo did not arrive at global fame slowly. There was no years-long struggle in small venues, no gradual accumulation of a fan base built one handshake at a time. The trio, Piero Barone, Gianluca Ginobili, and Ignazio Boschetto, were discovered while they were still boys, their voices already carrying an authority that had no business existing in bodies that young. Italy watched them emerge through talent competitions and television appearances in the late 2000s. Three teenagers from different corners of the country who were united by the peculiar circumstance of possessing classical instruments in a pop world that didn't know quite what to do with them. The answer, it turned out, was to embrace them entirely. Italy embraced them first. Then Europe followed. Then the Americas opened their arms, and the rest of the world did not lag far behind. They performed at the Sanremo Festival. They sang before Pope Francis. They sold out Carnegie Hall and the Palacio de Bellas Artes. They recorded with Placido Domingo. They became, in the language of the industry, a phenomenon, that overused word that is only accurate about one act in 1,000. In their case, it applied without exaggeration because what Il Volo achieved was genuinely without precedent. A classical crossover group that did not merely appeal to the existing opera audience, but created an entirely new one, pulling listeners from pop, from Latin music, from easy listening, from households where opera had never once been played. They made the classical voice accessible without making it smaller. That is extraordinarily difficult to do, and they did it while barely old enough to drive. For Piero, this meant that adolescence, that already turbulent, disorienting passage, happened largely in public, under lights, with cameras recording the way his voice changed and his face matured, and his sense of self struggled to keep pace with a reputation that was growing faster than any person reasonably can. Fame came before identity had fully solidified. That is not a small thing. It shapes a person in ways that don't always show up in interviews or Instagram posts, but show up instead in the careful, measured distance that person maintains from the world that loves them. Fame at the level Il Volo occupies is not an experience. It is a condition. It is the permanent background radiation of a life lived in the public imagination. And the public imagination, however affectionate its intentions, is not a gentle place to live. There is the travel, which sounds romantic until you have done enough of it to understand that airports are not adventures, but transitions, that hotel rooms are not retreats, but staging areas, and that the accumulation of time zones scrambles not just sleep, but the fundamental human sense of being located somewhere that matters to you. Piero has spent years in motion. Buses, planes, green rooms, photo call lines, sound checks at 10 in the morning in cities he may never see in daylight. The geography of his life is a list of performance venues more than a list of places. There is the performance of self that begins before any actual performance. The smile at the airport when the fan materializes with a phone camera. The gracious pause for photographs after an exhausting show, when every cell in the body is screaming for a chair and a glass of water and the mercy of an unlocked room. The interviews in which the same questions arrive, dressed in slightly different clothes, and in which the answers must be given with the same enthusiasm they received the first 100 times, because the person asking has only ever asked them once, and they deserve to feel that their curiosity matters. All of this is labor. It is invisible labor, unscheduled and uncompensated, and it is performed by people like Piero every single day of their professional lives, without the wider world thinking of it as work at all. And then there is the specific weight that Piero carries, in a way that distinguishes him from his bandmates. Ignazio is combustible, warm, physical, the one most likely to be found in the middle of a crowd, rather than at its edge, nourished by proximity to other people in a way that reads as genuine and easy. Gianluca carries a romantic openness about him, an expressiveness that turns emotion outward with natural fluency. Piero is different. Piero is the one at the corner of the photograph whose eyes are doing something more complicated than the smile that accompanies them. He is the one whose humor, when it surfaces, tends to be dry and interior, more observed than performed. He is the one who, when given a moment of genuine quiet, uses it, does not fill it with noise, does not reach for his phone to simulate the appearance of busyness, but actually inhabits the stillness as if it is something he has learned to conserve. This quality reads, to some observers, as coldness. It is not coldness. It is the learned behavior of a person who discovered early that everything he offers the world will be received and kept and examined by people he has never met, and who has therefore developed a very precise economy of offering. He gives his voice without reservation, completely, devastatingly, every single night. He gives his craft without compromise. What he guards is the remainder, the part that has nothing to do with music, the part that is merely and enormously near a human life. The silences that nobody photographs are where the real story lives. The phone call home that happens in the back of a moving vehicle, his voice dropping lower, the body language shifting towards something that belongs only to him. The meal eaten alone by preference, not because he has been abandoned, but because solitude, for someone who lives in constant proximity to crowds, becomes a resource as vital as sleep. The days between tours that he does not document, that appear nowhere on any platform, that generate no content, that exist outside the machinery of his public life with an almost deliberate totality. These are not the absences of someone who has nothing to share. They are the withdrawals of someone who has learned, through long experience, that what is shared cannot be unshared, and that the accounts where he keeps his private self must never be allowed to run dry. There are relationships that have never been confirmed or denied in any interview. There are friendships that predate fame and that are kept with a ferocity that is quieter than protectiveness, but more durable. There is a version of Piero that exists only in certain rooms, in certain cities, in the company of people who knew him before the applause, and this version is, by all the evidence available, the version he considers most accurately himself. Everything else, the stage presence, the media accessibility, the careful public navigation, is a performance of remarkable skill and consistency, but a performance nonetheless. The fans who love him are not wrong to love him. They are responding to something real. The voice is real, the artistry is real, the evident care he takes with his music is real. The paradox is not that the love is false. The paradox is that the love is so large, it creates the very conditions from which the object of that love must sometimes flee. A fan photographs Piero outside a venue and feels, in that moment, a connection, a closeness to someone who matters to them. What they may not feel is what Piero feels. The awareness that this image will be posted, shared, examined, that the expression on his face will be analyzed, that whatever was in his eyes in that quarter-second shutter click will be interpreted and assigned meaning by strangers, and that there is nothing he can do about any of it. The love and the enclosure arrive together. You cannot have one without the other, and understanding this does not make it easier to bear. None of this is accusation. The fans of Il Volo are, by every available account, among the most devoted and emotionally literate audiences in contemporary music. They understand, many of them, that they are loving a person and not merely an image, and they care about that distinction. But caring about it and being able to fully act on it are different things, because the mechanics of modern fame do not accommodate restraint easily. The algorithm rewards visibility. The culture rewards access. The very platforms on which fans express their love are designed to generate more content, more proximity, more documentation, and the person at the center of that attention has no structural way to opt out without opting out of the career entirely. So Piero does what he has always done. He constructs the boundary with precision. He gives what he chooses to give and guards what he has decided to guard. And he does both with such consistency that the discipline itself becomes invisible, mistaken for personality rather than recognized as policy. He shows up for the work completely. He shows up for himself quietly in the spaces between. He has learned to live in both registers simultaneously, and the cost of that dual existence is a kind of fatigue that no amount of applause can repair. What we owe the people whose voices we love is perhaps simpler than we've made it. The acknowledgement that they are not only the gift they give us, that the man standing still in the corridor 90 seconds before the lights find him is as real and as deserving of privacy as anyone who has never been asked to stand under those lights at all. The voice fills the arena. The man goes home, to wherever home can be constructed in a life that does not stay in one place. And the arena empties, and the roar fades, and what remains is a human being in a quiet room, breathing, deciding what to keep, deciding what remains his. Behind every extraordinary voice, there is an ordinary life that has been partially surrendered to the world and partially defended against it. The ongoing negotiation between those two territories, the given and the withheld, is the real story of Piero Barone. It is less cinematic than the concert footage. It is less shareable than the standing ovations. But it is the story that matters most because it is the one that belongs entirely to him.